Shadow wasn't always blind. Once, his amber eyes tracked tennis balls with laser precision and gazed adoringly at the Mitchell family's children as they played in the backyard of their suburban home. At 7 years old, this noble German shepherd had been the perfect family dog, until the cloudiness in his eyes began. It started subtly, a slight hesitation when catching his favorite ball, bumping into furniture that had been moved. The vet's diagnosis was progressive retinal atrophy, a genetic condition that would eventually steal all of his sight. The Mitchells assured themselves they'd handle it, that Shadow was family. But as his world darkened, their patience dimmed with it. "Watch where you're going," became a common shout as Shadow knocked over another lamp or bumped into little Amy's legs. The once confident dog grew hesitant, his tail no longer carrying its proud curve. During the day, he'd lie in his corner, head resting on paws, listening to the family move around him like he was an obstacle to avoid. The children stopped playing with him, frustrated by his inability to fetch or chase. Their laughter, once his greatest joy, became a torment as it moved further away from him. Mrs. Mitchell complained about the rising vet bills and the extra care he needed. Mr. Mitchell grew tired of cleaning up spilled water bowls and walking him more slowly on their once brisk morning routes. Shadow tried to adapt, mapping his home by scent and sound, but the family kept rearranging furniture, leaving doors unexpectedly open, moving his food bowl to different locations. Each change disoriented him anew. The final straw came when Shadow, startled by 5-year-old Tommy's sudden approach, snapped in fear. He didn't make contact, but the parents' decision was immediate. "He's becoming a liability," Mr. Mitchell declared, already searching for the nearest shelter on his phone. They chose Valleyside Animal Shelter, not knowing, or perhaps not caring, about its high euthanasia rate. The morning they loaded Shadow into the car, he sensed something was wrong. His nose picked up the sharp scent of his family's anxiety, their guilt masked by determination. The drive felt longer than usual, the air heavy with unspoken goodbyes. Only Amy, at 8 years old, cried openly in the back seat. The shelter's overwhelming sensory assault hit Shadow the moment they arrived. The cacophony of barking, the sharp antiseptic smell, the fear pheromones from countless abandoned animals. His remaining senses worked overtime, amplifying his anxiety. The Mitchell family's footsteps echoed on the concrete floor as they led him inside. Shadow pressed closer to Amy's leg, his last connection to the life he knew. The intake process was brutally quick. "German Shepherd, male, 7 years old, blind," the staff member recited mechanically, typing into a computer. "Reason for surrender." Mrs. Mitchell's voice wavered slightly. We can't handle a special needs dog. We have young children." More typing. Forms were signed. Shadow felt Amy's small arms wrap around his neck one last time, felt her tears dampen his fur. Then the family's footsteps retreated, their familiar sense fading as a new handler took his leash. Shadow tried to follow but was held back. His whine of confusion echoed in the sterile hallway. The metal cage they led him to was barely large enough for his size. The concrete floor felt cold under his paws, so different from his plush bed at home. Other dogs barked incessantly, the noise bouncing off hard surfaces in a disorienting cascade of sound. Shadow curled into himself, trying to become as small as possible. Hours blurred into days. Shadow refused food, his confusion turning to depression. The shelter staff, though not unkind, were overworked and untrained in handling blind dogs. His water bowl was placed in different spots, making it hard to find. Other dogs came and went, their desperate barks sometimes cutting off abruptly, never to return. Shadow learned what that silence meant. He could smell death in this place. The shelter's policy was clear: 7 days for owner-surrendered animals. Shadow's time was running out. His once gleaming coat became dull and matted. His proud bearing gave way to a defeated slump. Yet still, whenever footsteps approached his cage, his ears would perk up hopefully, seeking familiar sounds that never came. The shelter staff began avoiding his cage, their guilt palpable in their hushed voices. "Such a shame," they whispered. "Beautiful dog, but who wants to adopt a blind shepherd?" Shadow understood more than they knew. Each day, fewer people stopped at his cage. The scent of death grew stronger. On the 6th day, a staff member lingered longer than usual, her voice thick with tears as she read his intake form. Shadow heard the sound of a marking pen, felt the finality in the woman's sigh. His time was up. In his dark world, Shadow retreated deeper into himself, his noble spirit finally breaking. The family who'd promised to love him forever had sentenced him to die alone in this concrete tomb. Yet fate had other plans. That evening, as the shelter prepared to close, an email notification pinged on the front desk computer. A special needs dog rescue had seen Shadow's listing on the euthanasia list. The race to save him was about to begin. Sarah Chen's phone buzzes at 11:42 p.m., the shelter's urgent email lighting up her screen. 20 years of rescue work has taught her to always check late-night messages. They're often the difference between life and death. Her heart stops as she reads about Shadow. German Shepherd, blind. Euthanasia scheduled for 7 a.m. The attached photo shows a once magnificent dog, his spirit visibly broken. The shelter is 3 hours away. Sarah glances at the clock, already grabbing her keys. "Hold on, Shadow," she whispers. "I'm coming." The night highway stretches empty before her as Sarah pushes her rescue van to its limits. Her mind races with preparations. She'll need her most experienced vet, specialized equipment for blind dog rehabilitation, a quiet space away from her other rescue dogs. Her phone rings. It's Doctor Maria Rodriguez, the rescue's dedicated veterinarian. "I got your text. I'll meet you at the clinic at sunrise. Just get him out of there." At 2:30 a.m., Sarah pulls into the shelter's empty parking lot. She's arranged for early access, but every minute feels precarious. The night security guard leads her through dark corridors, the cacophony of barking creating a haunting symphony. Then she sees him. Shadow lies motionless in his cage, head on paws, already having given up. The sound of approaching footsteps doesn't even make his ears twitch. "Oh, sweetheart," Sarah breathes, kneeling by his cage. "What did they do to you?" The security guard's keys jangle as he unlocks the door. Sarah knows this moment is crucial. Approaching a blind, traumatized German shepherd requires extreme caution. She sits quietly, letting Shadow process her presence through his remaining senses. Minutes pass in tense silence. Then Shadow's nose twitches, catching her scent. His head lifts slightly. Sarah begins speaking softly, her voice carrying years of experience with traumatized dogs. "Hey, beautiful boy. I know you're scared. I know you've been betrayed, but I'm here to take you home." Something in her tone reaches through Shadow's despair. His tail moves, just a tiny thump against the concrete, but it's enough. Sarah continues talking, letting him track her location by sound. She unwraps a treat from her pocket, holding it near him. Shadow's nose works overtime, processing this first act of kindness he's received in days. With aching slowness, he edges forward. The treat is special, designed for anxious dogs. The scent alone helps calm them. Shadow accepts it gently, his inherent good manners showing through despite everything. Sarah's heart breaks a little more. This is no aggressive dog. This is a gentleman who's been terribly wronged. Loading him into the rescue van proves challenging. Shadow balks at the unfamiliar step up, his blindness making him extra cautious. Sarah doesn't rush him, knowing every positive experience now is crucial for his rehabilitation. She creates a trail of treats, letting him navigate at his own pace. Once inside, Shadow discovers the soft blankets Sarah's prepared. He circles 3 times, a normal dog behavior that makes Sarah smile through her tears, before settling. His body remains tense, as if expecting this comfort to be snatched away. The drive to the clinic is tense. Every stoplight, every turn must be announced to prevent startling him. Sarah keeps up a gentle monologue, letting Shadow learn to trust her voice. Gradually, his breathing slows from the panicked pace it's maintained since leaving his cage. Dawn breaks as they pull into the clinic's driveway. Dr. Rodriguez is waiting, her face grim as she sees Shadow's condition. The next few hours are critical. Shadow needs immediate medical attention, but his emotional state is just as precarious. Trust, once shattered, is hard to rebuild. Yet, as Sarah helps him from the van, something remarkable happens. Shadow presses against her leg, seeking guidance. This proud German shepherd, failed by humans he trusted, chooses to trust one more time. Dr. Rodriguez's initial exam reveals the extent of Shadow's neglect. Beyond his blindness, he's malnourished, his coat matted, his spirit deeply wounded. But his tail wags slightly at the doctor's gentle touch, the first sign that somewhere inside this broken dog, hope still lives. Sarah makes a silent promise as she watches the exam. Shadow will never know abandonment again. His darkness will be filled with love, his fear replaced with confidence. The journey ahead will be long, but Sarah's seen enough miracles in rescue work to know that sometimes the most damaged dogs become the greatest teachers. As morning fully arrives, Shadow sleeps peacefully for the first time in days, the nightmare of the shelter behind him. But his story is far from over. The real transformation, the one that will inspire thousands and change lives, is just beginning. The first weeks at Sarah's rescue sanctuary test both Shadow and his caregivers. His world is a complex tapestry of sounds and smells, each new sensation potentially overwhelming. Simple tasks become monumental challenges. Finding his water bowl, navigating doorways, even walking in a straight line, everything must be relearned. Sarah watches him bump into a wall for the third time that morning and sees him stiffen, expecting punishment that never comes. Instead, she clips a bell to her belt, helping him track her movements. "Follow the sound, sweet boy," she encourages. Slowly, Shadow learns to trust the tiny chimes. Dr. Rodriguez's innovative therapy program combines physical rehabilitation with confidence building. They start with nose work, hiding treats in easy-to-find places, teaching Shadow to trust his powerful sense of smell. The first time he successfully follows a scent trail to his reward, his tail wags with remembered pride. Each small victory builds his confidence. But the nights are hardest. Shadow's PTSD manifests in violent nightmares that leave him trembling. Sarah spends countless nights sleeping on the floor beside him, her presence anchoring him to safety. During one particularly bad episode, she discovers that classical music helps calm him. Bach becomes their nighttime companion. A breakthrough comes unexpectedly. One morning, another rescue dog, a blind senior poodle named Daisy, wanders into Shadow's carefully structured space. Sarah tenses, ready to intervene. But Shadow's reaction surprises everyone. He gentle noses Daisy, recognizing a kindred spirit. Their shared disability creates an instant bond. Watching them navigate the yard together, bumping occasionally but never losing their joy, Sarah realizes Shadow doesn't need his sight to live a full life. He just needs understanding. Word of Shadow's progress spreads through the rescue community. A specialized trainer, Mark Wilson, offers to help develop a training program specifically for blind German shepherds. His methods focus on building Shadow's natural abilities rather than compensating for his disability. They discover Shadow's hearing is exceptional, even for a German shepherd. He can track movements through the slightest sound of footsteps on grass. Mark teaches him to use this gift, developing a series of verbal and acoustic cues. The transformation is remarkable. Shadow learns to navigate complex obstacle courses by sound alone. His confidence grows daily. The fearful dog from the shelter emerges as a natural leader among the rescue's special needs residents. 3 months into his rehabilitation, Shadow faces his biggest challenge. A school group visits the sanctuary to learn about special needs animals. Sarah worries it might be too much too soon. Shadow still struggles with unpredictable situations. But as 20 excited children file into the yard, Shadow's noble nature shines through. He approaches them calmly, letting tiny hands gentle pat his fur. When one little girl, herself visually impaired, asks to feel his face, Shadow stands perfectly still, understanding her need to see him through touch. There isn't a dry eye in the yard. The incident reveals Shadow's true calling. He has a natural empathy for those struggling with disabilities. Sarah begins taking him to rehabilitation centers, where his presence inspires patients facing their own challenges. A veteran learning to walk with prosthetic legs finds motivation in watching Shadow navigate without sight. A child refusing to use her white cane changes her mind after meeting him. Shadow's Instagram page, started to document his journey, gains thousands of followers. People worldwide draw inspiration from his resilience. But it's his work with other blind dogs that truly showcases his transformation. When a terrified blind husky arrives at the sanctuary, Shadow becomes his guide and mentor. He teaches the newcomer his techniques for navigating the world through sound and scent, demonstrating that blindness doesn't equal helplessness. Dr. Rodriguez documents everything, developing new protocols for rehabilitating blind dogs. Shadow's methods become a template for shelters nationwide. The once discarded German Shepherd is revolutionizing how the rescue community approaches visual impairment in dogs. Yet challenges remain. Shadow still has moments of uncertainty, times when the darkness feels overwhelming. But now he has tools to cope, and more importantly, a support system that won't give up on him. Sarah watches him playing confidently in the sanctuary's yard, his movements sure despite his blindness, and marvels at how far they've come. The shadow of the shelter has lifted, replaced by a dog who proves daily that disability doesn't define worth. As summer turns to fall, Shadow's story spreads further, touching hearts and changing minds. But his greatest transformation, and the moment that will bring thousands to tears, is still to come. Because sometimes the deepest healing happens when we help others overcome the same challenges we've faced. 1 year after his rescue, Shadow sits perfectly poised in an auditorium filled with hundreds of people. The occasion is the state's largest animal welfare conference, and he's about to change how the world sees blind dogs forever. Before Shadow takes the stage, a video plays. It shows his transformation from the broken dog in the shelter to the confident ambassador he's become. The audience watches in stunned silence as his story unfolds. But it's what happens next that moves them to tears. A young girl named Emma, blind since birth, walks onto the stage with Shadow. She's one of the many lives he's touched this year. Her voice rings out clear and strong as she tells their story. "Shadow taught me that being blind isn't the end of the world," she says, her hand resting confidently on his fur. "It's just the beginning of a different way of seeing." The impact is immediate. Shelter representatives line up afterward, eager to learn about Shadow's rehabilitation program. Sarah's phone fills with messages from rescue organizations worldwide, all wanting to implement similar programs for blind dogs. But Shadow's greatest moment comes unexpectedly. A military veteran named James, who lost his sight in combat, watches Shadow demonstrate his obstacle course navigation. James has been struggling with depression since his injury, resistant to using a guide cane. Something about Shadow's confidence, his dignity in the face of darkness, reaches James in a way human counselors couldn't. 2 months later, James not only masters his own mobility, but starts a program pairing blind veterans with blind dogs. Shadow becomes a regular visitor, showing newly blind veterans that life holds endless possibilities. His story goes viral again, this time reaching the most unexpected audience, his former family. The Mitchells watch in astonishment as their once confused pet demonstrates remarkable abilities on national television. Their daughter Amy, now 9, writes a letter to the sanctuary. Her words, full of remorse and love, show that Shadow's story has taught even the youngest minds about compassion and perseverance. As Shadow's influence grows, research universities begin studying his techniques. His methods for mapping spaces through sound and scent become the foundation for new approaches to canine rehabilitation. The Shadow Protocol is adopted by veterinary schools nationwide. But perhaps his most profound impact is on the shelter system itself. Policies begin to change. Special needs dogs get more time, more chances. The kill rate for blind dogs drops dramatically as shelters implement Shadow's training programs. 1 year becomes 2, then 3. Shadow's muzzle grays, but his spirit remains undiminished. He's helped rehabilitate dozens of blind dogs, inspired countless humans, and changed policies that once would have condemned him to death. The sanctuary expands, adding a specialized training center for blind and disabled dogs, Shadow's Place. But it's the small moments that truly show his transformation, like when he guides a newly blind puppy through their first walk together, his patience infinite, or when he lies beside a recovering trauma victim, offering silent comfort, or how he still runs joyfully through the sanctuary's grounds, showing everyone that blindness is not a barrier to happiness. On the 5th anniversary of his rescue, Shadow receives a special honor. The governor declares Special Needs Pet Day in his honor. At the ceremony, surrounded by many of the lives he's touched, Shadow stands proud. He can't see the hundreds of faces turned toward him, but he can feel their love. Sarah, still by his side after all these years, wipes away tears as she accepts the award. Shadow didn't just overcome his disability, she tells the crowd. He showed us all that our darkest moments can lead to our greatest purpose. Back at the sanctuary that evening, Shadow lies contentedly on his favorite cushion. Around him, the sounds of happy dogs fill the air, many of them graduates of his program. A new blind shepherd arrives that night, terrified and lost just as Shadow once was. But now Shadow knows exactly what to do. He rises with dignity, walks confidently to the newcomer, and begins the gentle process of showing another soul how to find light in the darkness. His journey from death row to dignity has become a beacon of hope, proving that sometimes the most broken among us become the greatest healers.